I will attempt to replicate a painting by Auguste Renoir, the Skiff. I will not be using oils as in the original. I will be painting with Himi gouache. My goal with this exercise is, of course, not to have an exact copy of Renoir. My goal is to analyze his composition, the colors that he used in this work, how he achieved that lovely sunlit landscape. And I also want to see if I can adapt gouache brushwork to the brushwork that Renoir used in his painting. I think looking at great pieces of art is important, but if you want to analyze them from a painter's point of view and learn from them, I think the best thing to do is to copy them, because then you're starting to see the things that you would never see just from simple observation. I'm going to do a rough sketch on a sheet of artist watercolor paper, cold press. It's probably a bit of an overkill. I didn't have to use 100% cotton paper for gouache, and I even don't need texture. I can use hot press, but I have plenty of this paper, so that's what I'm going to use. I have a separate set of brushes for gouache, but I also use my watercolor brushes. Watercolor brushes will not be damaged by artist gouache or by Himi gouache. I'm going to need several sizes of flat brushes, and also I have a couple of round brushes that will help me to replicate those feathery brush strokes that Renoir used. They're both number 4 round brushes. And another thing I'm going to do before I start painting with gouache, the predominant color in the painting is blue, so I want to kill the white of the paper and give my painting a light wash of cobalt blue with watercolors. It's all going to be covered with gouache, but helps me to see the tonal relationships in the painting when I start. Okay, our prep work is done. My paper is dry, watercolor dried, and now I can start painting with gouache. First thing I'm going to do is kind of mass in my composition, locate everything that I see in the painting. The background is pretty complicated. It has a lot going on, some buildings. There are also some boats back there. So I'm just going to distribute all the elements of the painting without going into details. Working with various shades of green, mixing the green colors that I have on my Himi palette with some blue and some yellow. And the first thing that I immediately notice about this painting, and I think it applies to all the work that Renoir did, his paintings look very colorful, but actually the number of colors he uses is pretty limited, because this painting has blues, greens, a few warm kind of ochre yellows, and white. And that's basically it. And of course, in this period, Renoir and Impressionists, they were stepping away from using black and earth tones. So instead of black, he uses very dark blue, which fortunately I have on my palette, so I don't have to mix it. I'm just going to use this very dark blue that I have. Some elements of my painting, because I didn't transfer the painting and I didn't do very careful pencil drawing, some elements might not be quite in the right place, but as you know, with gouache, it's an opaque medium. It's not like watercolor, where if you make a mistake, it's very hard to make corrections. With gouache, corrections are very easy. So if I need to move something later or make it slightly bigger or smaller, it should be a problem. So at this stage, I am not super concerned about precision. I'm just trying to basically cover the surface of my painting with gouache. I would say the biggest step forward I made in mastering the gouache medium was after I started learning from Impressionists. I have a few more Renoir paintings that I copied here on the channel. I will leave you all the links in the video description and also in the cards in this video. The biggest thing I learned is how to treat the surface of the painting. You know, if you look carefully at this painting, it's a lot of color strokes, pretty small ones, applied next to each other. That's what creates that shimmering effect, that illusion of depth and sunlight in the painting. And I was struggling to create that with gouache, but after I started studying Renoir and copying, I think my brushwork considerably improved. And the key is to layer the paint. I would usually do one layer and then the painting won't look right, but I didn't know how to make it look right. So Renoir taught me to keep going and to layer the paint and to use progressively smaller brush strokes to create that complexity and that layered effect. And after I started doing that, my paintings considerably improved. So I think that was the biggest lesson. Okay, the first layer is done. Now we can start working on details. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. And at this stage, I need to be a little more precise. I see that that sailboat in the back is not quite in the right place. I'm going to move that slightly to the left. And somehow I didn't notice at first that there is another boat next to it, very dark one, like a rowboat. And that's what I mean, that we need to copy a painting to really see it. When I was looking at that painting, somehow I never paid attention that there are actually 3 boats in the picture. Gouache, we're going to use the same technique you would use in oil painting. It works really well. It's kind of reverse negative painting. When you paint dark and then you correct the edges of a dark object with lighter colors, like I'm doing on the house. I'm kind of verifying the edges of the roof with light blue, the color of the sky, and also the outline of those trees in the distance. And I know some artists struggle a little bit with edges in gouache, with softening the edges. For me, the best thing I found to soften the edges is to have fresh paint, the paint that's not dry yet, and to use a damp brush. Do not use lots of water how you would soften an edge in watercolor. I made that mistake before, and it will just create a blossom, a puddle of water. So slightly damp brush and just kind of massage the paint a little bit, and it will blend together if it's fresh. But re-wetting the paint or using a bunch of water in one spot is not a good way to soften the edges in gouache, because you will disturb the underlying layers of paint. I think another tricky thing with gouache is to get the values right, because gouache changes when it dries. Dark colors very slightly lighten and light colors darken a little bit. It kind of seems that I go over the same spot several times, but it's because I'm trying to adjust the values. As gouache dries, and it dries very quickly, the values change and I have to apply another layer to get them right. Let's work on the foreground. Those 2 female figures in the skiff, in the boat, in the foreground are the focal point of the painting, but they're painted very abstracted. You can't really see any details on them. And of course, we will never know what Renoir was thinking when he was painting. But in my opinion, after I finished working on this painting, I realized that even though he placed that boat in the center of the painting as the focal point. The thing he was interested in, not to paint figure, he was really interested in water. That was his main focus. Judging by the amount of detail and the complexity with which he painted the River Seine, that was his main interest. So that's another thing I discovered after I copied this painting. So I am going to work on the water as well with a smaller brush, with small brush strokes of different colors that I'm going to place next to each other in several layers and try to recreate that complexity of color that Renoir has in his painting. Okay, I think my replica is finished. Here is the final result. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I hope you give gouache a try. It's a great versatile medium and you see that it works even for copying great works of art without slow drying times and difficult cleanup of oil paint. Thank you so much for watching this video and I hope to see you in the next one here on Tamirab Studios channel. Help other artists to see this video by liking or sharing it. To see future videos, subscribe and click the bell button to be notified when they're published. Thanks again and stay creative!